my pleasure to introduce Nicola Somenzi, who is the head of responsible sourcing at Ferrero, and we're going to have a sort of a moderated Q&A session together for the next 20 minutes or so, and so Nicola is just going to walk us through sort of a deeper dive into the responsible strategy at Ferrero that he oversees, and that has been refined over the last few years, but he introduced it to us for the first time in 2021, and now we're going to go into another level of detail. Hi, Nicola.
Buongiorno, Leo.
Buongiorno.
How are you?
Good, good. It's great to have you back.
Thank you.
You're going to share slides on your end, right? You're going to.
I will
do you
do
have
that.
The permission? Okay, okay.
I think.
Yeah, great. Okay, so this is kind of a facilitated slideshow, but so I guess to start with, so last year you introduced us to Ferrero's responsible sourcing strategy overall, and just as a reminder for everybody who's here who wasn't there last year, can you just give us a brief overview of the strategy and specifically, you know, the role that supply chain transparency and visibility plays in your global responsible sourcing strategy?
Oh, yes, of course, Leo. So there are two questions. So first of all, I will start reconnecting from what is the responsible sourcing strategy at Ferrero. So we have 4 steps, basically, that you can see here displayed in the slide. What we call is this 4-step approach plus verification that you see on the right-hand side. And what do this step mean is basically, you see, starting from the base, supplier risk management or due diligence for us means know your supplier. So you need to know your vendor, and you know some attributes of your vendors. This is the first point, and we apply this rule, the due diligence, to the whole portfolio of the Ferrero group. So no exception. This is point 1. The second point is know your supply chain visibility or transparency, which is then also the main subject of this conference. For us is know your supply chain. Be able to map it and understand the structure of your supply chain beyond your tier 1. So the first layer is know very well your tier 1, know what they're doing from a sustainability perspective. Layer 2 for us is know your supply chain structure. Number 3 is know what your supply chain is doing. So from tier 1 to tier 4 or tier N, know what they are doing in terms of standards and certification based on our requirements, of course. And then when all these points we deem all these steps are not enough, we do our mitigation programs, our remediations, and typically are selected investments programs on our supply chains. On the right-hand side, we verify everything that is in these 4 steps through some partners that help us, third-party partners that help us to verify these points. So this is basically always the same approach that we presented last year, that we discussed last year. And then to your second part of your question is, what is the role of supply chain visibility? Well, the supply chain visibility is essentially an enabler of everything, because you cannot do investment on your supply chain if you don't know where it's important and where it is needed. You need to see, you need to have a visibility around it. You cannot have traceability, because to have lot by lot traceability, you first of all need to map your supply chain. For us, first we go with the supply chain visibility, then we do the traceability. So, and in general, for us, we consider it to be an enabler, and we hope in the future it's going to be also an enabler of the procurement strategy.
Okay, now this strategy has been in place, and you know, personally have seen how it's being propagated through the whole group supply chains. But there's been a lot of things that have changed in the last year since we spoke at this conference, and I think they come down to the sort of the changing legal landscape that we're all working through. So I guess what are the biggest drivers right now for Ferrero's responsible sourcing? How, has it changed in the past year?
Well, I think we always had three main drivers in Ferrero responsible sourcing, and these drivers are reputation, risk management, and law or regulation. I think since the inception of the department, these were our main objectives. To be frank, I think in the last 2 years has probably changed the order of importance. Today is for us is first the law, first the regulation, second the risk management, third the reputation. So they still all our drivers, but also given the evolution of the landscape from a regulatory perspective, also our probably our objectives a little bit shaped accordingly.
And just as a sort of for all the people who are coming from different brands and trying to make sense of these regulations, so the totally new step change in supply chain due diligence requirements. Some of the laws have passed and have already started enforcement in the US, but there is much more. There are much more questions around the laws that are coming around the corner in 2023, 24, 25, and in the EU in particular. Is there any guidance in terms of how Ferrero interprets the new supply chain due diligence laws that are being debated as far as they pertain to you and to your responsible sourcing projects?
Sure. This is a good question because as we said, the regulatory environment is changing, is quite fluid. I think what we are doing, the big effort that we are doing is to build one compliance at Ferrero. So one single system. The complexity, of course, is that we are trying to consider regulatory requirements in different countries. So you mentioned the European due diligence. That for sure, this is one of our North Stars. We always, from the beginning, already 3 years ago, we designed with this in mind. But recently, in the last year, we tried to fine-tune it accordingly to the German Supply Due Diligence Act. So we need to consider also some specific implementation and some specific interpretations. So what is happening in Germany that is supposed to be live starting in January next year. But this is just one part of the story, because then, of course, we always have in mind what's happening in the US. So US CBP, the evolution and the guidelines from US CBP, and also what is being debated today in US on, for example, on deforestation law. Plus, on top of all the due diligence laws or draft laws, depending on of the status, we also have to consider there are specific, for example, laws. For example, the one on EU proposal on deforestation with very specific requirements on some commodities in terms of supply chain visibility. Basically, they're very clear. So what we are trying to do is to put everything together to basically build one single compliance system that takes into account everything, that all the requirements that are happening in the different countries. So it's very complex, I have to say. It's a very complex challenge. But this is what we're trying to do today, and this is where we are.
Great. I mean, it's very clear, and it is a tough challenge. Okay, so if we zoom into just the visibility component, the transparency component, what kind of insight can you give us into your particular approach to supply chain transparency in the supply chain?
Yes. So the starting point is quite simple. There is not a formal definition of what is transparency. So at Ferrero, our starting point was really define it, understand what could be transparency for us. What does it mean? And as soon as we started investigating, we realized that we have a different level of maturity in different commodities, not because we are maybe lagging behind, it's because maybe the sector is at different levels. What we realize is that different sectors have different level of maturity in the level of visibility you can achieve. So because of this, we created our model of transparency that we call it 6 degrees of transparency. That is basically this one. And it is what does it mean? It means that we realized that whatever was the commodity or sector we were looking into, we could get to one of this level of transparency. So of course, we're speaking of country of origin. This is the minimum level. Then we have an additional level that is the farmer group. It's typically an intermediary, right? Then we call it farmer group in cocoa, but typically in other commodity could be something else, could be refinery level, it could be mill level. Then we have another level which is with a higher level of precision, which is the farmer or the plantation level. And here is just knowing who is my farmer, right? And already getting here could be very complex because in cocoa, we are speaking of very small orchards, just to take an example, and we have 100,000 of, just in our supply chain, we have 100,000 of farmers. And but this is true also for other commodities, could be hazelnut. And so it's very fragmented. So already getting to this third level of precision, it's quite complex. And then, but in some sectors, we are already beyond that. We can have a GPS coordinates, so we can know the farmer and having a point indicating on a map where this farmer is sitting. And in some other commodities, we can have even the polygon mapping of the farm or the plantation, depending on, of course, always on the commodity we're speaking. And in some commodities, we have a last level of control, which is the satellite monitoring, where the polygons are constantly monitored through satellite services. So this is our 6 degrees of transparency. This is how we defined, and basically we map each commodity against these levels. And this is also how we are implementing, and this you know very, very well, and this is also how we are trying to shape our dashboards, our visibility dashboards. We really want to transform the slides, the models into reality, and this is the direction we have taken.
I think this 6 degrees of transparency is extremely clear, and it's useful, and it's applicable to a whole suite of commodities, even beyond agriculture, but at least within agricultural commodities. So it's extremely useful. It's definitely been useful for us as well, working together. Do we know yet how far you need to go into the 6 degrees for these new due diligence requirements, or is that something we don't know?
Yeah, no, look, good question. No, I tell you, my gut feeling reading the different laws, some laws are expecting you to have for sure some form of digital mapping with probably some GPS coordinates. For sure, I'm referring to for example, here you see an extract of the deforestation law, European deforestation law. So here it's clear what is this is just a quote. So for sure, some laws are referring to this level of precision. Some other laws are not so clear around it. My feeling is that the due diligence laws in general ask you to have more control of the tier one. So for sure, at least to have some sense of for sure, the origin of country and potential intermediaries there. I'll take out of my mind, for example, the German Supply Chain Due Diligence Act. The focus is the tier one. You need to know your tier one. But for example, it says that if you have significant hints that there are some issues in some particular commodities, you should know beyond your tier one. So this is where we are. And so my gut feeling is that we are somewhere between the origin country to GPS coordinates, depending on the level, depending on the different laws.
Okay, so I like this 6 degrees slide so much. So one more question on this. Is there anything particular about the different raw materials that you're sourcing that make it easier or harder, or get to one degree of transparency versus another for those ones that you source responsibly?
Yeah, but the most important thing is the maturity of the sector. The point is, if you are alone in the effort of mapping a particular sector, and we see it especially in some commodities which are for us very important, but maybe not for other players, then it's very difficult. The effort is big because you are the first to require a full sector to do change management. I make the example very clear so that we give a name. So here you see the status on some of our most important commodities as an example. When we speak of hazelnut, you see here we are at GPS level, so we are able to map our farmers on a map. But you know better than me that the effort of rolling out, going through the different tiers of the supply chain to retrieve this data is very complex, because not everyone in supply chain has the same awareness, the same willingness to go to this level and to share this data. And so for sure, where this need is not pushed in an harmonized way through many players in the sector, it's for sure a bigger challenge. Then when we speak of cocoa, you see here an example. This is our orchard plotting. I don't say it's simple, but in this case, our suppliers are really a great help, because the data are there, and it's typically marginal for us, the cases where we don't have and we need to ask to have the plotting done. But in most of the cases, our supplier are an amazing business partners in providing already all this wealth of information. And of course, our job then is to make sense of all this information, to use them properly. Then there are sectors like palm oil, where really you can, if you want, the maturity of the sector allows you already to be at the leading the edge, because there is already satellite monitoring. All the RSPO mills are already satellite monitored. In our case, we also already have the plots of all our plantations, so they are. We have every 3 months we receive reports on the status of our plantation, and so this is just to show. These are 3 examples where we have 3 levels of of transparency. So, and as I said, what is really making the difference is the overall maturity of the sector. And when I say sector, it's mainly of the supply chain and the operators of the field.
Very clear, and I think you know, for anybody deploying this, it does sound like it's a big multi-stakeholder initiative, and of course those industries where many brands and manufacturers have been doing it for a long time are far ahead, as you're showing here. Look, this has been fantastic, and I think that this classification into degrees of transparency is going to be useful for everyone who's in the conference. Is there anything that gets you? I mean, this is a lot of work you have, that we all have ahead of us. You know, in terms of what's next, what's around the corner for supply chain transparency? Are there new drivers? Are there new technologies you're excited about? What's next?
But I think in terms, let's take it from the last point you mentioned, is technology. Well, I think there's, of course, there will be at a certain point, it will come a moment for a technology like blockchain, but I don't see it yet to be the main driver for making this change happen, because this is not an enabler of transparency. You need to have the transparency to add a layer of blockchain. So I see this coming probably a little bit later. Personally, I feel that probably could the artificial intelligence on imaging, especially from satellite, might yield some results before. But if you ask me what application, is not yet very clear to me, but my feeling is that there are building, probably results might come a little bit earlier. And in terms of business drivers, what I feel is that supply chain, the complexity. I think the visibility will be a driver of the complexity in the next years. At least for us, we already see it. As soon as you start seeing, it's almost spontaneous. It becomes spontaneous to see, okay, if this is my supply chain, this is what I should do, what it makes more sense for us as a sourcing strategy. So I think this will be coming in the next years.
Great. You know, one of the things that so thank you for walking us through this comprehensive and multi-commodity strategy, for giving some organizing principles, and then I think the other thing to mention is that Ferrero has a charter published for each commodity that you have in your responsible sourcing portfolio. So this approach is also being communicated in some detail and available for everyone to read about.
Yes, of course.
Great. Well, look, with that, I think it's been very, very useful, and I want to thank Nicola Somenzi from Ferrero, and hand it over to Marissa.
My pleasure.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nicola, and thank you, Leo, as well, for this great Q&A. I know folks in the audience were really, really interested and really riveted by this presentation, so thank you again.